Welcome to the first Enhancing Accountability webinar event. I am sitting in our office in Rosebank in Johannesburg. My colleagues are sitting in an adjoining room running the webinar. We might have to ask your indulgence as it's the first time we are running such an event. We're delighted to have so many people join us. Thank you very much. I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing introductions as you've all seen the blurb about the webinar. We are delighted to have with us today Professor Jaap De Visser from the University of the Western Cape Dullah Omar Institute, and grantees from a number of the NGOs who receive funding for projects supported by the EU's Enhancing Accountability Programme. They're all going to be talking about how this new framework for senior appointments proposed by the government since 2022 and adopted in October last year might influence or have relevance or might be applicable to the process of appointments in municipalities. We're bearing in mind that at the moment it's a framework, it's not a set of legislation or regulations. And we've asked Prof De Visser to draw out some of the key elements of the framework and to think in a hypothetical and creative way about what this might mean if those principles and key elements were applied at a local government level. So I'm going to hand over directly to him to kick off the conversation. We're going to work very hard to keep this within the hour. And then I'm going to invite the representatives from the projects funded by the EU's Enhancing Accountability Programme. We're working with a number of projects who are focused at the local government level, working on issues of accountability. They're going to respond to Jaap's points from their experience and knowledge of the field. So we hope that it'll be a lively conversation, and we look forward to your participation from the audience after that. So with that, I'm going to hand over directly to Prof De Visser. Thank you, Jaap.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for that very generous introduction, and I'm really delighted to be here with all of you to kickstart the discussion on the applicability of some of the remarks and principles and issues raised in the professionalization framework with respect to appointments of top staff in municipalities. So once again, thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the opportunity to the Enhancing Accountability team and all the colleagues that have made this event possible. I'm assuming I'm audible and visible in terms of the slides that I'm putting up. That's great. So yeah, let me get straight into it because we want to do this within a short amount of time. So let's get straight into the issue of rethinking how municipalities appoint top staff. And I don't need to go into the reasons why it is important. I think all of us are well aware of some of the challenges that we experience in local government, where very often, at the root of some of the problems that we see is flawed appointments at senior management level. It's not the only problem, and it's not always a problem, but very often it has to do with that. Now, the professionalization framework, just very briefly, has 5 pillars. So it's much broader than just talking about appointments of senior staff in national and provincial governments. It also talks about introduction and onboarding, performance management, planning, continuing development, a range of other, civil service related themes, but of course our issue of the appointment of top staff really is located in the 1st and the 5th pillar of the framework, namely recruitment and selection and career progression and career incidents. And with career incidents, they mean promotions, but also suspensions and dismissal. So just to give you a sense of where in the framework our discussion is located. Now, to really sort of understand what the framework says and how we could sort of imagine around it in applying it to local government, we first just need to briefly reflect on how does it work now? How are senior managers appointed in local government? And for many of you, this will be things that you already know, but it's good to just have a brief reflection on it. It's important to distinguish senior managers from other staff. There are two different legal frameworks applicable to the two different groups of staff members. And here we're talking about senior managers. In other words, the municipal manager or the city manager and the managers that report to him or her. So in other words, the two top echelons of the municipality. And the legal framework for all of the local government staff, both the senior managers and the other staff members, is actually quite dense and emanates from at least 5 different sources. We have, of course, the Municipal Systems Act, which comes from COCTA, the National Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. They are the sponsors of the Systems Act, and they implement the Systems Act or oversee it. And the Systems Act includes rules on recruitment of senior managers, competency requirements, the way they are appointed. It includes that ban on holding political office that many of you would have followed the debate about, that municipal managers are not permitted to be political office bearers in political parties. And just recently, COCTA attempted to extend that to the entire municipality. In other words, that all staff members were banned from holding political office in political parties. But the Labour Court has shut that down and said, no, that goes too far. You may only do it for the senior managers. So this must still be confirmed by the Constitutional Court. So that's an ongoing discussion. But that sort of theme on political office and senior managers is located in the Systems Act, together with issues around how senior managers are disciplined, performance management, their conditions of service, and importantly, the provincial oversight over how municipalities implement these rules. You can all find all those rules in the Municipal Systems Act. So that is really the most important piece of legislation when it comes to the appointment of senior managers. And secondly, there is the financial angle, the Municipal Finance Management Act, of course, coming from the National Treasury, which has added to this legal framework of the Systems Act rules on competency requirements. In other words, what kind of competencies must officials in municipalities, particularly those dealing with financial issues, which competencies must they have, and how they must be disciplined if they misbehave. And already some of you will see overlap between the MFMA and the Systems Act, and that is because there is overlap. There are rules in both these pieces of legislation that apply to the same issue affecting the same staff members. Then we have, for the rest of the staff in local government, they are mainly governed by the collective agreement concluded in the South African Local Government Bargaining Council, which deals with all the conditions of service for staff members, includes some rules for senior managers, but deals mostly with other staff. So their conditions of service are regulated in the collective agreement. Then there is, of course, the council's own policies. Municipalities adopt their own human resources and labor relations policies that are also applicable to staff members, including senior staff members. And then the last kid on the block, so to speak, is the Public Administration Management Act, which comes from the Department of Public Service and Administration, which seeks to establish an overall framework and general principles for the civil service, but stops short of regulating a single public service. So sort of it hangs over there as a bit of a framework legislation. So immediately we must conclude that this is quite dense and this is quite fragmented. And there is overlap between these 5 instruments, which doesn't make it easier for municipalities to implement appointments for senior managers and also their career incidents. But then very briefly, I think most of us know this, senior managers are appointed by the municipal council. The council appoints the municipal manager on a fixed term contract, which may not extend longer than 1 year beyond the general election. And the council also appoint the Section 56 managers, so-called Section 56 managers, which are the managers that report to the municipal manager. And they are appointed on permanent contracts. That's a fairly recent change to the law, that Section 56 managers are now appointed on permanent contracts. So it is a council. Of course, there's procedures that apply. There's regulations that apply to how this happens, the recruitment process, the advertising, the shortlisting. The interview process is tightly regulated in terms of the Municipal Systems Act. But ultimately, it is the council that makes the decision. So importantly, the municipal manager does not appoint his or her team. The municipal manager makes a recommendation and consults with the council and would obviously push for certain individuals that he or she wants to work with, but ultimately it is the council's decision to appoint the Section 56 managers. Then the second layer here that's important to identify is who then oversees this. What happens if things go wrong? Who polices whether or not councils adhere to the rules? And this is where the MEC for local government, the provincial MEC for local government, comes in, because he or she must monitor the appointments, because for every senior management appointment, the council must send a report to the province. And the MEC must monitor whether everything is done according to the book. And if the MEC suspects that things are not done according to the book, he or she may not second guess the appointment or nullify it or strike it down, because the MEC doesn't have that power. But the MEC must then go to court and ask the court to declare the appointment invalid because it hasn't followed the rules. So that's overall the system. There's lots more that can be said about it, but for now, I think that's good enough so that we can proceed with the discussion. Now, let's turn to the professionalization framework, some high-level observations. The first observation I think that needs to be made is, if you look at that system of the safeguarding the quality and integrity of senior managers, how does that happen? We have a legal framework for it. It's dense, it's complex, and it's fragmented, but it's there. But who actually makes sure that it is adhered to? Now, firstly, it is the council. When the council makes the appointment, it must ensure that the laws are followed. It must be properly advised by HR practitioners and recruitment specialists and lawyers on, are we doing it according to the book here? Because if there's a problem, then the council is responsible. The council is a political actor, as we know. The second level is the MEC for local government. If something does not go according to the book, if problems are detected, then the MEC is the one responsible for going to court and asking for that appointment to be nullified. So my sort of observation here is that there are two political actors that are enforcing the quality and integrity of senior managers. So the system allocates that duty essentially to politicians. So I want us to hold that thought, because we can come back to it later. Now, turning to the framework doesn't really address local government directly. It's mainly targeted at national and provincial government and the civil service there, but it does have the ambition to also be applicable to local government, and sometimes it speaks to local government explicitly. But generally, the framework is addressed at national and provincial government. So that makes it a bit difficult to really apply it to local government, because many of the issues are not applicable to local government. The third observation that needs to be made is that there's a constitutional context, which makes this a little bit complicated, because we're dealing with 257 local governments that, according to the Constitution, each have a degree of autonomy. They're not autonomous in the sense that they are sovereign, they can do whatever they please, but they have a degree of autonomy, which emanates from Section 161D of the Constitution, which says that the municipal council may make the personnel appointments that it needs. So national and provincial governments must sort of adopt a bit of a hands-off approach. They cannot go too far and interfere in personnel appointments, but they can regulate it, which is, of course, what has been done. There is lots of regulation on the municipal public service in all those laws that I listed earlier. So one of the questions that we must also ask with regard to this framework is, this regulatory framework that exists, which is dense, which is fragmented, but which is there, Do we want to tear down the entire edifice and start from scratch? How radical do we want to be in changing the legal framework for these appointments? Because it is something that has been developed over many years, is very detailed, and not easy to identify quick fixes. Nevertheless, let's look at what the framework then says. The most eye-catching proposals are again in chapter 1 and chapter 5, or pillar 1 and pillar 5, where it makes proposals for changing the recruitment of senior managers, also in local government. It emphasizes a partnership with professional associations, which I think is an important theme that I want to return to later. And then it also makes certain proposals on making certain training programs compulsory for all local government staff. And in pillar number 5, when it talks about career progression and incidence, it makes proposals such as prescribing a minimum years of service or exam to be taken before promotion. It identifies the rapid promotion of civil servants also in local government as a problem. Essentially, people get promoted too quickly is something that you hear quite often in the framework. That we have fairly junior and staff members or staff members with insufficient experience find themselves very quickly in very senior positions because of staff turnover, because of vacancies, but also because of favoritism and cadre deployment. And then the promotion happens too quickly and they're actually not up to the task. So hence this proposal. Again, a link to professional bodies is made to say, well, maybe professional bodies must get involved more when decisions come up about the promotion of staff members. Maybe there should be some sort of role for the professional associations to give a view on that before someone is promoted. And it also makes a proposal to appoint arbitrators to deal with consequence management, so that we deal with this excessive litigation, disciplining, suspension, staff members and councillors tumbling over each other in disputes over these career incidents, such as suspensions and dismissals. But very specific proposals are made targeting directly local government with regard to senior managers in local government. And I want to highlight 3. The first one is the recruitment of the municipal manager. So what the professionalization framework says is, why don't we include experts and representatives of the provincial treasury on the recruitment panel in a municipality, and we allow the Public Service Commission, which is the independent national body focused on the public service, mainly at national provincial level, but why don't we ask the commission to recommend 2 technical experts for each panel that recruits an inmate? Alternatively, they propose the council could also constitute a selection panel comprising of what the professionalization framework calls members of high standing. It's a bit uncertain what the framework means with it, but I see it sort of as a citizen panel of members of high standing in the municipality that would be responsible for appointing or recruiting the municipal manager. So quite far-reaching proposals made by the framework here. Then it also suggests that we need to revisit the issue of these political appointments of municipal managers, because they are appointed only for a 5-year term, linked to the term of office of the council. And the framework identifies that as a root problem of the interference and the high turnover and the problems that we see with these appointments, that it is such overtly linked to the term of office of council and then becomes a political appointment. So they're saying, why don't we make it 10 years? Why don't we even make it a permanent appointment? So again, quite far-reaching proposals made in the framework directly with respect to local government. And then, of course, the framework says that must be coupled with a practice and strict rules that you may be appointed for 10 years or permanent, but you must exit on poor performance. Now, one would argue that goes without saying, that of course you must exit on poor performance. You will be dismissed if you perform poorly. But I think the fact that the professionalization framework mentions this, I think alludes to the fact that we know that system doesn't really operate very well. We hardly ever hear of municipal managers having to exit on poor performance, in the sense of that in terms of the performance management system, they failed to meet their targets, or there was a considered process followed to assess the performance of the municipal manager, and as a result of that, he or she was dismissed. It's usually for a whole host of other political and nefarious reasons that we see municipal managers exiting office. So that's why the framework mentions that. And then it makes a proposal with regard to the Section 56 managers and says that in general, the accounting officer, the city manager or the municipal manager should be able to appoint his or her team. So the framework suggests that we need to revisit this idea that the council appoints the managers reporting to the city manager, but that the city manager should have the final say about these appointments. So my last slide is then some provocations. What do we make of all of this? There is a degree of municipal autonomy over personnel appointments. It's in the Constitution, and I would argue it's a good thing. It is there for a reason, because it makes sense for the municipal council to have control over personnel appointments, because it's good for the municipal council's ability to implement its strategy, to implement its IDP with people that it appoints, as opposed to people that get appointed somewhere else, that get imposed on it by a central government entity or a provincial government entity. It's part of municipal autonomy, and in principle, it's a good thing. But it's too often abused. I don't need to go into detail or cite the statistics or go into a big rant about the misery in some of these municipalities. We know that quite often that municipal control or autonomy over appointments is abused with devastating consequences for service delivery and the dignity of residents in municipalities where bad appointments are made. So how do we disrupt that sort of parochial or potentially corrupt local dynamic? How do we disrupt that? Do we need even more law? Do we need more regulations? Already it's such a dense field. There are layers and layers of laws applicable to this issue. Do we need to add more law to it? Do we need to add more bulls to the kraal? We already have at least 4 or 5 government entities regulating the municipal public service. It has grown like this over time. Initially, it was the Department of Cooperative Governance that was mostly involved, but added to that came the National Treasury and now the Department of Public Service. And the framework actually is quite explicit and says the Department of Public Service must take charge and must review all the legislation and pull control over this issue towards itself. So clearly there is competition. There is a bit of a bonfire looming within government over this issue. And it's good to point that out, because this is not good for local government, because the recipient of local government legislation is the municipality. And at the moment, I venture to say that our national government is not coherent on this issue. It is all over the show. This issue is being regulated from different corners of government with contradictory, overlapping legislation. I know of case law, for example, where a court has thrown out a suspension of a misbehaving municipal manager or a misbehaving government official, local government official, because the municipality happened to choose the wrong provision, because it got confused with this conflicting and overlapping set of laws. So I would argue we don't need more bulls in the kraal. We don't need more entities getting involved in regulating the civil service. We need coherence. We need coherence on this issue for the benefit of local government. Thirdly, is it perhaps time to limit the autonomy over personnel appointments? Do we need to give other government entities some power to decide or even to influence or even decide these issues? Can we leave it exclusively to municipalities, given the abuse that we see? That's an important question. And immediately I also want to ask the question, does centralization help? If we lift this decision-making power to a higher level, make it a provincial decision or a national decision or a decision of some independent entity, will that help? Will that result in better appointments? because I'm not entirely convinced that just centralizing the decision making will automatically result in better decisions, because the efforts at corruption and nepotism and capture will simply shift their attention to that body in order to make nefarious things happen there. What is a recurring theme in the debates about is maybe we should consider a role for the Public Service Commission. We have the Public Service Commission. It's an independent body recognized in the Constitution, comprising of experts in the public service, but its mandate is mostly limited to national and provincial government. Can we conceptualize a role for this independent body to influence appointments and career incidents at local government level also? The professionalization framework hints at it, but doesn't really work it out. But more and more experts and stakeholders are saying, we need the Public Service Commission to come in to disrupt this parochial, corrupt local dynamic in a responsible way. Then lastly, my last comment deals with the professional associations. And I think this is another area where we need to look. And I'm going to start my comment with a bit of history. Before 1994, if you were a chief financial officer or a CEO, as they were called, or a town clerk of the municipality, you had to be a member of a professional association. You had to be a member of the Town Clerks Association, or you had to be a member of the Association of Municipal Finance Officers. If you were not a member, you could not be such an official. So the associations took care of the quality and the integrity of their members, just like lawyers and doctors and other professions do, or are supposed to be doing. They don't always do it, but they're supposed to do it. So that was a system that applied before 1994. Now, of course, that system was used to keep black people out of the profession. It had a racist intention and an exploitative intention. So that's why it was abolished. So the role of professional associations in safeguarding the quality and integrity of their members was essentially replaced by a lot of laws. A lot of regulations on who may be appointed, performance management systems, and then, as I indicated earlier, allocating the power to enforce this to politicians, namely the council and the MEC. So I think now it's time to think back at that system and maybe think, did we throw the baby out with the bathwater? We abolished it for a very good reason. But shouldn't we bring in the professional associations once again? And of course, in a non-racist, non-exploitative and inclusive manner, which goes without saying. Because shouldn't it make more sense that the profession itself looks after its own quality, in other words, education, continuous education of its members, and also looks after the quality of its members? If a member of a professional association misbehaves, there's corruption or there's misbehavior, then the association will chuck him or her off the roll, and then he or she is automatically disqualified from being a senior manager in government. So it's a measure of deregulation. Isn't that part of the solution, or at least an area in which we can look for solutions, instead of looking at more law, more institutions, more regulation, which may not produce the results that we want? Right, with those few comments, I hope I stayed more or less within time. I look forward to hearing what others make of this. Thank you so much.